When it comes to historical warfare, no one does it quite like Total War. The idea of large-scale battles with battle formations, thousands of warriors on screen fighting all at the same time, well, it blew my mind when I first saw it. Not every game has been amazing, but Total War's best are some of the best strategy games ever made. So, some quick rules as to what is and isn't on the list. Firstly, I'm excluding the Warhammer games. I know, some of you adore them, but truth is, they're just not for me. I could never really get into them, and for that reason, I felt I couldn't judge them as fairly as I would like. Secondly, is the Total War Saga games. They're not full releases at full price, so it's not fair to hold them up and judge them next to the full titles. With all that in place, I'm strapped on, and this is every historical Total War game ranked from worst to best. Number 10, Shogun Total War. I guess, all things considered, it is only fitting that the first Total War game should be regarded as the worst. Like a lot of people who are Total War fans, I did not come across the series until Rome Total War, the third installment. As such, I find that Shogun plays like a proto-Total War game. The absolute stripped down bare bones of a franchise that would go on to be legendary. That is not to say that this game is without merit, far from it. The cutscenes and animations that punctuate the game were a clear sign of the greatness to come, and the gameplay, while arguably the worst of the series, was still a grand battle with hundreds of units on screen, and so, for a game from 2000, it was still revolutionary. It's just that, as a seasoned Total War player, there are so many quality of life features that I simply take for granted that it makes Shogun feel lacking. I mean, you can't even draw a box to select multiple units in battle. However, I guess it should reflect well on a series that they have only got better as time went on. Shogun Total War may be bare bones, but they're good bones. Number 9, Medieval Total War. And what better indication that the series progressed as it should than having the second game be the second from bottom. Medieval started to improve some of the basic aspects from Shogun, such as adding in siege battles, basic though they were. A lot of issues I had with Shogun I could copy and paste into here, so I won't bore you with it. I do feel for any of you who got into Total War around this time and are now having to listen to me dump all over your nostalgic memories. However, if you only got into Total War later in the series and you were thinking about venturing back to these older titles and giving them a go, then be aware, while there is some fun to be had here, the simplicity of them is jarring. Number 8, Empire Total War. The first misstep on our list. Shogun and Medieval had the excuse of having potential that the technology of the day could not fulfill. Empire has no such excuse. Total War took a big step trying to revolutionise the series, but coming off the back of greatness, Empire stumbled. The problem was that the series had, so far, only been set in the Iron Age and Medieval eras. Empire was set in the Age of Enlightenment, and more importantly for us, the age of gunpowder-based warfare. It was a brave move, but the danger was always going to be that we had a situation where battles devolved into standing in lines and firing at each other until one side broke. How do you solve an issue like that? How do you make that interesting? Empire didn't have the answer to that question, unfortunately. However, Empire was not without merit, and there was still plenty that I enjoyed about it. For the first time we had naval combat, and it was fun and engaging combat at that. I much preferred sea battles to land battles in Empire. Empire also took on the idea of revolutions. poor public order no longer simply resulted in your forces being kicked out by a group of rebels. Instead, rebellions could become revolutions, sparking civil wars or entirely new breakaway factions to form. Empire tried to do something new and exciting with the series, and for that it should be commended, even if not all of it paid off. Number 7. Total War Attila. Again, in Attila, we have a game where risks were taken and new ideas were tried out. And like with Empire, some paid off and some really didn't. Attila was named after the legendary Hunnic leader, and he is the titular character in this game, set against the backdrop of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Unlike other Total War games, in which you start with a small amount of territory and seek to expand, Attila has a variety of challenges, such as controlling a movable horde rather than controlling territory. On the other hand, there is the challenge of holding together one of the two halves of the Roman Empire, empires that will crumble to pieces before your very eyes, and there isn't much you can do to stop it. This all makes Attila a unique entry in the series, but ultimately, these challenges aren't for the faint-hearted. A Western Roman Empire campaign won't exactly be fun. It's more a frustrating campaign that will take the idea of Murphy's Law and repeatedly bludgeon you with it. Number 6. Napoleon Total War. Napoleon Total War was a game that, on the surface, could have been an extensive DLC for Empire. However, I think that's a bit of an unfair assessment of Napoleon. Personally, I don't see Napoleon as a mere extension of Empire, but rather the realisation of what Empire should have been. The battles were better realised, and the campaigns more intense and engaging. Named after the legendary Little Corporal, a man who was actually of average height by the way, Napoleon is a far more focused game than some of the others on this list. You focus on the Italian campaign, and when that is finished, Napoleon's invasion of Egypt, before moving on to the Napoleonic Wars proper, spanning all of Europe. Most Total War games give you a starting date, and from then on, how the game unfolds is up to you. Napoleon encourages you to stick with the more historical routes that the actual figures took. Of course, in the final campaign, if you choose to play as Napoleon, you can do what the French Emperor himself couldn't: wipe out the coalition, take Moscow and London, and control a European-wide empire. Number 5. Total War Rome 2. If I were writing about Rome 2 at its launch, believe me, it would be a lot lower than this, maybe even at the bottom of the pile. But what started life as a buggy mess has developed into a very good game. However, that does bother me. Rome 2 was one of the earliest examples of studios releasing a subpar game, only to endeavour to fix it later. I mean, we were all taken in by that Siege of Carthage gameplay footage. This is a shady business practice that seems to be flying under the radar. But, taking Rome 2 as it is today, it is a good game with a plethora of content. Some of the smaller scale campaigns like Caesar and Gaul are exceptional and where the game shines. That being said, the internal politics mechanics have been worked and reworked a couple of times since the game released, and they're still an underwhelming feature that I pay little heed to. And when I need to, in the case of civil wars, they're poorly realised. But Rome 2 showed us what a modern Total War game could be, with a huge number of individual factions giving us a far more in-depth and detailed campaign than had ever come before. Number 4. Total War 3 Kingdoms. I went into Total War 3 Kingdoms knowing the least amount, historically, about this period than I had done with any other Total War game that I'd played before. The period of the Three Kingdoms relates to a conflict in China during the 3rd century. In this conflict, the Han Empire broke apart and rival warlords fought among each other for control of the crumbling empire. At the conclusion of this conflict, China was split into, you guessed it, 3 kingdoms. Total War 3 Kingdoms was another attempt at doing something new, Given the near-mythical status of the Three Kingdoms era, the game tries to go with this and creates a near-mythical tone. Rather than a general's bodyguard unit, your generals fight as lone heroes, carving their way through vast swathes of enemies, or dueling enemy heroes on the field of battle. You could, of course, choose to play in the more traditional way, but Three Kingdoms lent itself to this romance mode, as it was called. In addition to this, Three Kingdoms made a vast improvement to the diplomacy systems, something that had always been something of an Achilles heel to the Total War games. Ultimately though, I felt that China was so vast a landmass, and with all the playable factions being different warlords rather than unique factions, the game can start to feel a little samey at times. Number 3. Total War Shogun 2. The original Shogun is a bit like one of those Da Vinci designs for a helicopter or a tank that he drew. They were excellent ideas, but he just didn't have the technology to pull it off at the time. Shogun 2 is all that potential brought to glorious life. A wonderful game that showcases why Sengoku Jidai is an age that has fascinated for centuries. The amazing visuals and sound design bring the warring samurai to life in a way that I don't think has ever been matched before or since. Shogun 2 does share one issue with Three Kingdoms, and that is all the factions are merely different clans, and therefore there isn't much variety in terms of unit types available. But that doesn't concern me overly, because the amazing battles and beautifully designed backdrop help to support one of the best campaigns in the Total War series. Shogun 2 does what every other Total War game struggles with, insomuch that it has a well-made family system and has found a way to make the end game difficult rather than just steamrolling everyone. And for that, Shogun 2 deserves your praise and adulation. Number 2. Rome Total War. The first Total War game that I ever played, and one of the very best. Rome Total War was an amazingly diverse game with a real eclectic mix of playstyles and factions to choose from. Okay, so is it a historically accurate representation of ancient Rome? Certainly not, but it was a damn entertaining game. Not only were the battles thrilling and the campaign immense, but the little details were there too. The game's use of sound, the music, the sound effects, the general speeches, all of it was so wonderfully immersive. Rome was also the first game of the series to implement fully rendered cities for your armies to attack and defend, a feature that was, oddly, removed from later iterations, much to their detriment. Rome Total War was the game that sparked my love affair with this series. However, Rome wasn't built in a day, and what Rome Total War started would be perfected in the next series, which was, of course, number 1, Medieval 2 Total War. Everything that Rome Total War did so amazingly, Medieval 2 did better. Another set of wide and diverse factions, yet another amazing soundtrack, and the general speeches were fleshed out to an even greater degree. The castles, depending on how advanced they were, could have multiple layers of walls and defences for you to overcome. Medieval even improved the little details to a greater degree. Your agents had accompanying videos with multiple endings depending on their success or their failure. Upgrading unit armour on the campaign map would be reflected on the battlefield with visual upgrades. The campaign for Medieval 2 was given an extra layer of depth when you had to take religious considerations into account, with Catholic factions really needing to keep one eye on their reputation with the Pope. Holy wars could be called, but going out on extended campaigns overseas may leave you vulnerable at home. Simply put, Medieval 2 is everything a Total War game should be, and there is a reason that, for years now, fans have been asking, when is Medieval 3 coming? Thank you so much for watching. What did you think? Did I get it right? Post your own list in the comments below. Do you think we're ever getting a Medieval 3? I really hope you're enjoying the Total War Rome remaster, and I also really hope that we're getting one for Medieval 2. I'm Strat Tom, and I'll see you next time.